Well, here we are. I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next. It's the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I'm joined by extreme metal duo Veilburner, who are just about to release their seventh album, The Duality of Decapitation and Wisdom, on the excellent Transcending Obscurity Records. So this interview was one that I was particularly excited to be able to do. I have a little bit of history with Veilburner. So back in 2019, I think it was, the band released their fourth album, A Sire to the Ghouls of Lunacy. I hope I've said that correctly. Yes. So I reviewed the album, and then I sent a request to interview the band via email, which you can check out on Blessed Altazine. And then a couple of years later, they released their follow-up album, Lurkers in the Capsule of Skull, and I interviewed them again for Blessed Altazine, again via email. And then the year after that, they released, essentially, it's like a self-titled album, but it's Veilburner with all of the vowels taken out. And so that was their sixth album, and I interviewed them again for Blessed Altazine. And at that time, I had never actually seen what the duo looked like, because for the band, they have a whole visual thing going on. They have masks, they have very elaborate visuals, they have different masks for every album. And the visuals are a big part of the band. So essentially, the band is Mephisto, Deleterio, and Chrisom, Infernium. But in fact, for this interview, because they agreed to do this without the masks, I actually got to meet them and understand that they are Dave and Chris. So for the purposes of this interview, I am talking with Dave and Chris from Veilburner. But whenever I listen to their music, I very much feel like I am listening to those otherworldly masked figures. So anyway, it was a treat to talk to them. Veilburner are one of my absolute favorite metal bands. I think they're one of the most interesting, mysterious, and creative metal bands out there. Essentially, the musical side of Veilburner is driven by Dave, and the vocals, the lyrics, the kind of concept, and the visuals are driven by Chris. And they are, I think, equally fascinating from a musical and from a visual side. There's also a whole load of lore and mythology that the band have created over the course of their 7 records. And that's something that they got into in the previous interviews I did, and they go further into in this interview here. This interview also includes a great story from Dave to explain the origins of one of the masks that they have. Because I'm a nincompoop, I missed the opportunity to ask the two of them to talk a bit about what was in their backgrounds, because they have all kinds of interesting paraphernalia connected to the band or otherwise. But they were generous enough to send a series of photos after the interview. So what I'm going to do, for anyone who is watching this on YouTube, at the end of the interview where I play one of the tracks from the album, I'm going to give you a little slideshow, and you're going to get to peek behind the scenes and see some of the interesting artifacts that the duo have got. For anyone who is listening to this on Substack, I'm including a set of the pictures. And if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Music, then you get to hear them talk. If you are interested in exploring more of the visual side of Veilburner, you can go to Instagram, where they are Veilburner_official. And yeah, if you want to go support the band, go visit Transcending Obscurity Records. You can go directly to the website, where they have a North American or a European web store. One of the things which is great about Transcending Obscurity is they always do all kinds of excellent merch. So you can get the album and past Veilburner records on vinyl, on CD, merch, t-shirts, hoodies, etc., all kinds of cool stuff. Definitely go check that out. Go support the band. I'm a huge fan. And if you like creative extreme metal, or if you just generally like creative, weird, avant-garde, heavy music, then I think there should be a place in your heart for them. You can follow me at Tom Osman Sounds. You can see what I'm up to musically at tomosmansounds.com. I've just put out a record, well, a cassette. You can find out information about it there. And with that, there is nothing left to be said. but Dave and Chris of Veilburner, take it away. So yeah, this is really, really cool for me. It's we spoke the first time, I guess it was about 5 years ago, and this is the fourth time we've done an interview. The first time where we actually see each other. One of the first interviews I ever did, I think possibly the second interview I ever did, was with you guys. So
Really?
yeah, it's been really, really cool to follow the progress of the band since then and get your insights release by release. And
Great.
I'm very happy that we can talk in real time.
Yeah, me too. I like doing the written interviews. We're podcast though, it does have that more conversational flow as opposed to just, like a written Q&A. You only get responses to what you ask, but
Exactly.
with the back and forth, you can go to different places based on responses.
Now, so this is the first time that I see you guys without your masks. How would you
Mhm.
like me to refer to you in this interview? Because I can.
Dave's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, Chris is fine.
Yeah, no one calls me by the pseudonym in real life. It's just something for the albums and the project.
Okay, cool. So I remember last time round with Veilburner, although, I mean, is that how you would actually call the album? It's like Veilburner, but with the vowels taken out.
I'll
Oh,
defer to you, Chris, for that one.
Yeah. It was basically our way of being able to do a self-titled album, but also working in the number six to the album title, since it's the sixth album. So removed the vowels too, and you can use the vowels as their own side. It's like their own story within the story. So just another thing to throw in there for anyone who's actually interested in following that. It's there. So it was just a unique way that we could use the name, use that niche kind of black metal thing with removing all the vowels and being more quote unquote cult, and just kind of throwing that out there. But there's actually a reason behind removing the vowels. They actually play a part in a story on their own separate kind of tone.
yeah. So that time round, that was kind of like a move away from you've been having this sort of more elaborate titles for the albums. And now this time round with the Duality of Decapitation and Wisdom, you've got probably your longest title that you've had so far of any records. Tell me a bit about the concept for this album.
It basically works around everything's seven, but ultimately where six left off, it is following basically through the abyss, and whatever the abyss is to the listener or the follower, and it ties into some Vedic astrology with Rahu Ketu kind of laced in there, which is Rahu is the head and Ketu is the body. They're nodes of the moon, and they influence things like eclipses and such. So I work that into that, and it's essentially you need to lose yourself or the world, meaning your head, your mind, in order to be able to transcend or move across the abyss. And so it's sort of that journey of doing so, and then what is the final outcome of that for the album, which will carry into 8, 9. And it's just another part of the story. Has a lot of Masonic, Thelemic, a lot of undertones in that area. So, and other uh, philosophies and such. So just kind of try to make it my own world, our own world, wrap it all together and go from there.
And to that point of this being the seventh album, so you've got 7 tracks and they're all 7 minutes long. Did that have any particular kind of challenges? And how early on had you decided that you were going to construct the album in that way?
I'll take this one because when I started we do the music first. I finish the records musically, and then I send them to Chris for, lyrics, themes. He puts his head around it. So I started writing the first two songs, and I noticed that at the end of the second song, which one of the singles that Transcending Obscurity is released right now is the one Ill Visions of Hex-Shaped Hiss. Behold the what is a Howling Spirit, Chris? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
I only know the songs by like album number and track number, 7.1, 7.2, and then that's how I kind of keep them organized in my head. So I finished that song, which was the second song in the album, and I noticed that the first two, they were both kind of hovering right around that 7 minute mark. And without me even trying or having any conceived notions of doing that, and that kind of steered me in gave me the idea to, hey, well, it's a seventh album. I noticed these songs I've written so far are clocking in right near 7 minutes, and I know that we like, and especially Chris loves those Easter egg things. And I thought he would be really into it if we did an album, 7 songs, each song 7 minutes, and then if he wants to add any other layers to it, like he can take that concept and run with it. Um, so at that point, I was like, why don't I try to, and I won't try too hard. Like my thing is, if it ruins the album flow or the song flow, I'll abandon the idea, because the absolute most important thing to me is that everything flows nicely and doesn't sound awkward. I'd rather have good songs first that had that have those little extra Easter eggs than ruin the songs trying to shoehorn something in if it's going to be awkward. So I'm like, well, let me give it a shot, and it worked surprisingly well. For whatever reason, at that point in the way I was writing songs, I was just in this habit of writing 7 songs that were roughly 7 minutes. I was in sort of a pattern. I was in sort of a flow. So I was happy I didn't have to do much. Um, I had to do a little bit of nudging here and there to make it work, but nothing drastic enough to have it affect, the song flow or the album flow in any kind of negative way. Like um, there's no long gaps of silence just to fit that 7 minute mold, or there's no songs that feel like they get cut too short in order to squeeze them into that 7 minute mold. They all just kind of seem like they naturally begin, flow, and end, and just happen to be 7 minutes, 7 minutes each. So I was surprised, really happy with it. I didn't even let Chris know I was doing it. I wrote every song, um, and sent him the album. I just surprised him with it. He didn't know I was even writing. So, like, here's a surprise. Here's an album, and then he noticed it, and you know, and then he was off to the races with going a little bit deeper with the whole 7 concept.
And how long ago was that? Because if I remember this correctly, I think it was when I interviewed you the last time, you said that you'd actually just finished album number 8. So, Chris,
Mhm.
when did you get the material for this album?
I think it was like 2020, 2021. I to be honest, I can't really remember. Uh,
It would have
uh,
been, yeah, it would have been I remember because I finished writing the music just as the worldwide pandemic was starting. So I was putting the finishing touches on it in March of 2020. So I would have sent it to you shortly after that, and you would have started wrapping your head around it during the lockdown, um, the COVID-19 lockdown.
And how
yeah,
close?
that's probably
Yeah.
why. Oh, sorry.
No, no,
Go
no,
ahead.
please. I was just going to say, like, how sort of close or far away do you feel to the concept now? Because you've probably been thinking about, several albums and several concepts since this one now.
If if there was one album that kind of ties them all together, and yeah, it is the one that's coming out now, so it's kind of cliche, but like this is the one that everything kind of reaches its climax. I think if you take from even album 1 up to 6 and you follow them through, you're going to really understand um, all the things that are happening, going on. And I think there's going to be some more things revealed to those who really want to dig into that will start getting to see it actually come undone and understand it completely. I'm hoping, anyways, because I'm thinking, looking back on COVID, that's probably why I went I went pretty gonzo on this one with what actually is going on in the lyrics. Somehow we were able to pull it off without it being too contrived or silly, basically, just to do something because of numbers or whatever. But everything worked out, I think, better than what I expected. But I don't think I'll ever go down this path again, trying to recreate with the way I built the lyrics and using the words. I think this was a once and done, but I'm glad we were able to do it, and it actually complements the music.
And in terms of the physical release of the album, are you going to have lyric sheets with the record and with the CD?
Yes.
Cool. And so thinking about the music, because I don't think I haven't really complimented you yet, but I think the album is tremendous. I absolutely love it.
Thank you.
And I mean, I love all of your music, that's why I keep wanting to talk to you again and again. But I feel like now at this point for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people that are familiar with your music, there are aspects of your sound that are very familiar and very like identifiable as Veilburner. Like I think, Dave, you've got a sound for some of your guitar, not for all of it, but this, I think I've described it before as rubbery. I don't know if that is really kind of like the word to use it, but you have this kind of like this sort of jelly-like sound in some of your guitar leads. And Chris, with your vocals, there are certain elements of the way that you sing that I sort of recognize album by album. But at the same time, with each release, there are definitely things that are different. And on this release as well, like I think if I am actually going to say the names of the tracks rather than which track number. So in track number 2, so Ill Visions of Hex-Shaped Hiss, Behead the Howling Spirit, some of the riffing on that, I felt was kind of, I don't know, maybe like in parts of the album, there's kind of like thrashy riffing that I hadn't really heard from you before. And in the two-parted duality of Decapitation and Wisdom, like the transition between those two tracks, I really like what's going on with some of the ambience, and there's this really cool melody that sort of builds in the second part of that track that seemed quite kind of different. And also as well, like at the very, very end of the album, you've got this sort of crescendo that's coming in that felt like something I hadn't heard from you before. So from both of your points of view, was there anything that you kind of like, was there any way that you approached this differently, or any sort of recording techniques that you used that that were new for you?
By the time we got to album 7, I think for music wise, I think we were kind of we did a lot of experimentation, I'd say, in the first 2 or 3 albums. We were we sort of had that kitchen sink approach, like we were still building the sound. Let's see what works, and then we'll refine as we go forward. By the time I got around to writing the music for album 7, I was pretty much solidified in, okay, um here's the sounds. These are the sounds on our sound palette. Um, from time to time, we'll try something new, but I think a lot of experimentation and refine. And now at this point, it's just smaller and smaller refinements as we go on, and that'll continue throughout 8 and 9. Um, but yeah, it's a sort of thing where, I mean, this whole sound, I've been building it, or building towards it, probably since 2005, 2006. When I left, I mean, I had an old band that just kind of dissolved, and I was looking to do something different. And so I just sort of started playing around with, I mean, because at that point, around 2006, 2007, that's when the whole, the digital music software plugins revolution was kind of, coming of age. You had a lot of manufacturers making these digital products um, for workstations. And they kind of allowed you to do things in the virtual space with acoustic instruments or instruments plugged into the computer in ways that you can't do in real life. Like the guitar software has things that I use has things you can do that with the virtual amps, and that you can't do in real life. Like you can use, because of the emulation, you can try what it would sound like to have certain tubes in certain amps, certain virtual amps, that you can't put those tubes in an amplifier in real life. And things with like synthesis and audio effects. So I'm like, it's really kind of a great time to try to make something a little bit different. Band I did before, you know, loved it, loved working with those guys. I'm still friends with them to this day, but it was like I was still in that phase where I was worshiping my idols, and everything I was writing was just kind of it was like that stock early '90s Morbid Angel sound, um, Tampa, Florida um, stuff. But you know, you're only anybody who writes music or does any sort of art form for a long time knows that that's not going to be satisfying over the long term. You're going to get to a point where you're like, all right, I've kind of gotten to a point where I figured out how to, um, you know, copy things that have come before me, but you know, ultimately, I wanted to try. Eventually, you want to tread your own path. You want to, carve your own little niche, or create your own little link in the web that hopefully other people can be inspired by. So I started fooling around. That's when I started fooling around with like software plugins and different kinds of instruments, and came up with a lot of like, the sound patches that we use and the effects patches that we started using and continue to use. And I think by the time me and Chris linked up in 2013 to start doing this, I had a whole album's worth of material to write or already written. And I was working with another band that he does called Torture Ascendancy. And, you know, we had known each other from before. And he was asking me what I was up to since my last band dissolved. And I told him about, this new music I was writing, but doesn't have any, it's just music, doesn't have any lyrics or vocals. He wanted to take a listen to it and, you know, and hear it. And he heard it and liked it and said, "Hey, if I have, this is giving me ideas. Let's, if you want to, I'll be more than happy to show you what I got." And I loved it. And he put the vocals and lyrics to, that first collection of songs. And then we just released it independently. But the second album was when we really got experimental, and we were trying that kitchen sink approach. And if I remember correctly, it had like there was some parts that had like a kazoo on it, and some really out there like vocal effects and stuff.
Mm.
And I mean, that's still one of my favorite albums. I think it got um the Numenon album. I don't know if it got as good of a response as the others, but that's sort of like, when we were having the most fun playing around with different effects and vocals and different instruments and different instrument effects. Since then, since that second album, we've been refining. You know, we figured out what was working, what wasn't working, and from there it was just taking. It's like when you make a recipe, if you're a cook or a chef, there's experimental phase and then there's the refinement phase,
Mm.
where since the second album, we've sort of been in the refinement phase, and the recipe just gets a little more refined with each album. So at this point, I would say it's just small refinements to the point where we're not writing the exact same album that we did before, because that would be boring. But we're also not making any strange off the wall left turns and completely changing our style either. It's just sort of like, where's the next logical step we can go with this, and let's go. Let's find it, and let's continue on with the journey.
Well, I guess as well, there's enough variety in your sound, like within an album in general, to give you a fair amount of space to work with. It's not like, some kind of Floridian death metal template where you go, this is the way our tracks sound, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something I try and do. Like I said, we have a lot of different influences, but we don't want to. I don't want to write like some sort of schizophrenic album where it's like, okay, this song's going to sound like a Florida death metal album. The next one's going to sound like an Opeth type song. It's like there have to be components. We can touch on those territories, but there have to be, audible components in each song that sort of make our wanderings kind of more cohesive. Like you can tell it's the same band. It doesn't
Mm.
sound like band A wrote the first song, band B wrote the second song, and so on and so forth. It's like there's got to be that distinctness, that identifies that you're listening to a song, that it's us. And I think that sound palette that we've been refining, as long as we have that, that'll go a long way towards keeping things cohesive, so that song from song you're listening to the same band, despite the fact that it might wander into different territories like you would hear from other different artists.
Yeah. This is probably going to be a question more for Chris. Thinking about, like, Dave, to your point about the origins of the band and the refinement of the sound, thinking about more the conceptual side of things. When Dave first came to you and he had this music, how did your idea for sort of the visuals of the band and the conceptual aspect evolve?
So at first, we really were just, he sent me Nil Absolute off of Three Light Bearers. That was the first song I actually got to hear. That's the first one he actually played while we were recording my other band. And I had those lyrics kind of piecemealed laying around in different songs. And I started listening to the album with some of the other pieces that he started sending me after that. And everything just started kind of fitting where I was at life then, with Torture Ascendancy, just kind of some lyrics that I didn't have. But as we started getting through the album, it started shaping up with the Three Light Bearers being the first three albums, and building that concept of, okay, this is going to be a transhumanism idea. So we started really kind of hashing that out together. And I think that helped him write Numenon, because Numenon, you start hearing quite a bit more industrial sound, some of the kind of weird off the metal track. But I think Numenon's probably my most revisited album, because there's a couple of songs on there that I really, really like. I can't believe that it's a song that I actually was a part of, kind of feeling. So we were constantly basically building that up for those three. And then four hit, the duology 4 and 5, which is a sire to the Ghouls of Lunacy and Lurkers of the Capital Skull. And that came, I tried wrapping some stuff that was going on personally, trying to figure out how I could put it into this universe and allow it to be organic without telling my own story. So started coming up with this character that we used, that had the mask that was featured a lot. The character that was shown with our two characters was basically just Dave standing in for that. But he basically has porphyria, which they call the vampire disease. Affects the skin. You can rash out, so he gets burned and stuff when he's out in the sun. So he's an isolationist, and he starts hearing these voices. So those voices essentially would have been from those first three albums. Like, did those two characters reach transcendence? Where'd they go? So it's like you start to come into this play of, this guy is doing this bidding for these voices or these beings, but it can also play on a schizophrenic level. So there's several layers to all this. You can literally, as a listener, take it any way you want. If you see it as two entities possessing a person, that works completely fine. If you think it's just someone who is batshit crazy, that too works. And then with album 5, that worked backwards through the voices perspective. So album 4 basically was through the character's point of view, and what happens at the end of that album. Well, if you play album 5 from the first song, that actually is playing backwards. It's actually the 8th song, so it's a companion piece to 4, and it just works backwards. So you can do it either way. You could play the 5th album first, Lurkers, or you could play a Sire first, but it's still the same outcome. That's why in the first song, In the Tomb of Dreaming Limbo on Lurkers, is this is not the end. This is nor the beginning. This is somewhere in between, where neither really mean anything, because it's kind of trying to tell you the hint of, there's a bridge here. It doesn't matter which way you play this, it's the same end result, and they're companions. So we just always sit down, try to talk to each other. I kind of tell them where my headspace is. And that basically worked up to 6. And then, like he said, I had no clue he was working on 7. I thought we were just taking a break. And then lo and behold, he's like, hey, I got a song for you. I'm going to send it over. And I look, and it's the whole album. So then it was off to running with that. And I had the Duality of Decapitation Wisdom title sitting. I had it probably since album 3 or 4, and I just wasn't able to use it. And then just the evolution of where we were going, it just worked perfectly, especially with my whole way of how I map the lyrics and use the lyrics, without giving anything away. They kind of work as a cipher, and that cipher can be discovered off the first song, Temop Ab and Mysticum. If you understand, like anyone who understands what Temop Ab is, they can use that to build off the cipher. So I was glad that the Duality of Decapitation worked with the way that I wanted to map everything out, and then it was just off to the races. So
And Dave, I saw while Chris was talking there, you have picked up a mask. Can you hold this up? So yeah. So that's
Yeah.
something that you've used for photo shoots, right? Is that actually something that you had for one of the earlier albums, kind of like with effects put over it?
I love telling the story of this mask. This is first, it's a silicone whole head. It's really heavy, and it was specially made. Um, the story, this is the mask that when I held it up when Chris was talking about albums 4 and 5 and the character with the porphyria disease. Um, and the story behind this mask is that while Chris was writing basically this character, um, coming up with him and fleshing him out conceptually and how he's going to fit into the album. At the end, when he sent me the lyrics and we recorded everything, we started looking for how we were going to represent him in the photo shoots. So we needed a mask, and we looked around and found online and found this company called Shattered FX. And they had just released their new line of masks, silicone heads. And I was looking at them, and this one particularly caught my eye for whatever reason. It's a design that they had just come up with, and then I was like, talked to Chris, showed it to him. He's like, "Yeah, that's really kind of because it still looks like a human. It doesn't look like a monster. It's human. You can tell, but it looks like it's got that extra kind of disturbing effect because it looks like it's not like an over the top monster. This could be a real person,
Yeah.
with just a disfig with a with a disfigurement or a disease, somebody that would be shunned by society or wouldn't have any friends or would just be living in isolation the way Chris wrote him. And we found Shattered Effects. We saw this and we were like, yeah, that's just it's subtle. It looks like it doesn't look like too monstery. It looks human but disturbing. Reached out to him, and then that's when I discovered that Shattered Effects is located in Mountjoy, Pennsylvania. Chris was living in Mountjoy, Pennsylvania at the time. So I was like, how about that? While Chris was on one side of town, basically coming up with the idea for this guy and fleshing out his characteristics, basically inventing him on the conceptual level, somebody else in the exact same town that he lives in was basically at the same time coming up with a visual representation that we ultimately connected with when we
Mm.
saw it online. And um yeah, so we ordered the mask, and I was talking a little bit to the guys and the people at Shattered Effects. I was like, hey, we're actually my music partner, we're going to use this for a music project. He's right in your town. Would he be able to swing by and pick it up so we can save on shipping charges? Unfortunately, they wouldn't let us do that because apparently in this mask making game there are trade secrets, and they don't want people coming by their workshop because, a competitor, if we were a competitor trying to steal their formula, we could theoretically show up on their doorstep or in their workshop just to pick something up and basically have a look around and look at their operation
Interesting.
and steal trade secrets. So
Mm.
unfortunately, we weren't able to meet these guys face to face and, shake hands and have a little powwow session about this guy. But so ultimately, they just had to send it in the mail. But I was like, how about that? I mean, the synchronicity of it all
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Chris to be and the two guys in the same town don't know each other. We're coming up with the same character at the same time, and we ultimately just found each other through just on the internet. Like I didn't even know it was Mountjoy until I went to click buy now.
Yeah. thinking about that kind of visual side of things and the way that you have created this, I would say, kind of mythic quality to the band. Like, before this interview, like I said at the beginning, I'd never actually seen what you guys looked like. My understanding of Veilburner was always like, there are these two characters, and you would have a different photo shoot and a different representation album by album, but there was that continuity of like almost like your alien creatures or your otherworldly creatures. And it's sort of, I feel like it harks back to a time before the internet, to where people would go and pick up a record and they'd look at the cover and they'd look at the back, and that would basically be the only thing that they would get of the band. And in some cases, like, if you think of like the Merciful Fate album, Don't Break the Oath, you look at the back and you've got King Diamond and he's just this black silhouette. And so I can imagine, looking at that album at the time, you hear the music and go, wow, this is really weird. And then it's like, who's making this music? It's just this demonic figure underneath these inverted crosses. Were there any particular, records for you that were an inspiration to being able to represent the band in this way, that people would take the images that you gave them and they wouldn't get to see beyond that what was going on with the band?
Chris, you want to go first?
I don't know if anything comes to mind too much. I mean, in certain bands, I don't know if I want to, like, I would say maybe Portal would be somewhat of an inspiration in the sense of being able to use something other than without masks or paint, like, because honestly, at first I was kind of like, let's just do corpse paint or some sort of paint and such. But Dave does not like paint on his face, from what I remember.
No.
And also, he had all these bizarre oddity robes and such. So kind of, it was an inspiration of, I guess, the self really for Dave, because he was like, hey, I have all this stuff. I have a collection. Can we dress up? I'm like, yeah, sure. Why don't we? But also with the name of Veilburner, it allowed us to use different masks we could evolve, and it's burning that veil. It works with the music, works really with everything, and it kind of let us hide ourselves so that when we're first being introduced, no one knows me from possibly Torture Ascendancy or knows Dave from 10th Circle, if they would even remember back that far. So I would say Portal, can be an influence there, just with being able to look at it and see that they're able to do it and do it very well. Probably the scariest band in the world, but I don't know. I think more movies would have influenced some of that stuff. Because again, we're both movie buffs, like some really bizarre 70s, 60s, some of the 80s stuff. I was huge into the French stuff, the gore stuff back in the day. So I think more of that developed from there than necessarily a band.
Yeah, and your talk about, when you were talking about back in the day, how you would get an album, your only cue as to what it might sound like was the album cover. You'd look at the cover in the store, turn it around. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, so that resonated with me on a big level. It was like, unless you knew somebody who had the album that you were interested in, and you could hear it from them, and it wasn't something played on the radio, which, no metal was played on the radio except hair metal at that time. Your only cue as to what you were going to get was from looking at the album cover, right there in the record store, and you had to make a game day decision as to whether you were going to hand over your money and risk getting something that didn't sound like what was on the cover and be bummed out, or whether it was going to hit and just click and you were going to be like, yes. So I've always kind of carried that with me. So the idea, that sort of ethos with me. So the idea of doing mass characters is everything Chris said. Like I've been collecting masks and oddities and strange antiques for a long time. And, we have them on display here in my house, in my office, but we don't get a lot of visitors. So, when people do come over, I like to show the stuff. It's like a little museum. But having this outlet really gave me a chance. Okay, we can use these in photo shoots, and these can be our characters. And that way we can present that mystique that I liked and you obviously appreciated growing up, where it's like, okay, here's an album and it's made by these two mysterious characters. That, that feeds into like it feeds into the immersion. Like when
Mhm.
you're looking at an album, when you're looking at an album, you want people to get not only immersed in the audio, but also in the visuals. And, the traditional band photo with a bunch of guys looking tough up against a brick wall. It's like, that's great um, and it works for a lot of bands. Um, but bands, I think, that want to go a step further than that and sort of world build, that helps with the world building. And
Mhm.
that not only and it helps stimulate more senses that just what you hear. You can have something visual to go along with it. I mean, I think people remember things. It clicks in their head more and it sort of locks in when you engage more of the senses. So um, that's why I love Transcending Obscurity Records and their efforts to give people, you know, tactile things with the
Yeah.
packages. You can listen to something, you can look at things, you can have things, you can say you're stimulating three senses right there with all the little knickknacks they include, in their box sets and with their albums and everything. I mean, I say if we could invent like a signature Veilburner scent and just sort of like, cover all of our products in that so that people can kind of get engage people with the sense of smell too, to sort of get that associated with us, I would do it because it would just help engage more of the senses and help people remember us more. But as far as getting back to your original question, if there was anything or any other bands that sort of influenced that, yeah, going back to the '80s, bands like Merciful Fate, we're huge for that. More recently, I would say, what I really dig is the fact that there are certain bands like Blue House Nord in France who you never see their real fate, and you only experience them through the albums and through the visuals they choose to let you see of them.
Mhm.
And that really takes me back to those days of the '70s, '80s when, before everybody saw, what their favorite artists looked like in their house. That was your only connection with them, and it built
Yeah.
that mystique. So it's part of the idea that I grew up with. We're trying to infuse with our product now is let's give people some audio, give them a little bit of visuals, enough to sort of build a world, let them get immersed in it, um, and leave it at that. Don't um, let people look behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Um, mhm.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Transcending Obscurity Records because I wanted to give them a shout out because I do think that they are almost unmatched in terms of the way that they have these physical representations of the releases that they do, and they do it so beautifully as well. And with Veilburner, you've had some great special editions of your albums that have come out, beautiful
Yeah,
sets, whether it's the CDs or the vinyl. Um, Thinking about that and in terms of the latest record, so you've had these various great striking covers and artwork. But on the latest record, you've got quite a striking painting by Luciana Nedalea. Have I pronounced that name correctly?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
And I think the painting is called Invoking the Scepter-Bearing Leader of the Muses. Tell me the story behind having this artwork for the album.
All right, so I basically did the artwork and all the layouts for the first six albums, and just I wouldn't say it was burnout, but with this album, with the concept and everything, and just how the stars aligned with it getting completed and the overall, I just felt an extreme success with this one. It's my favorite one of any musical thing I've done, any lyrical performance, any vocal performance. It just kind of hit on all fronts. And actually, I had gotten that cover. I had purchased that. Actually, another person had purchased it for possibly another project, but it always sat with this album. I kind of knew it was always going to be with this album, so I was able to get it into my hands physically, and it just it says the title, it everything. And I came across her probably a year before I actually found that particular piece, and just all of her art is amazing. and she is also someone who studies. So she'll give some background into why she made that painting, what it could be from, and that's what that one is. It's off of one of the rituals, and
Yeah, I believe it's called the Papyri. I'm not sure if I'm butchering this name or not. Papyri Grace uh, Magicae. Um, and she said that she used elements pertaining to all crucial points of this ritual, the invocation, the greeting formula, preparation for the rite, and the rite itself. That's me kind of quoting, you know, her that's me quoting her description of the piece that she painted.
And is there any other sort of companion piece to that? Like when I don't know if I've seen beyond the actual the cover part. Like if you have the vinyl, for example, are there other aspects of this painting?
no, it's just that. But I've already gotten the next for album 8, so there will be a continuation of her art. I'm looking to do something. We're probably looking to do something actually custom and original for Veilburner now that she kind of was speaking to her in short and through messages and stuff. She kind of gets where my head's at. So once I start developing some of the lyrics, because I have stuff written, but nothing's really solid yet. So I have little fragments, some choruses or some verses written for each of the songs for 9. But once I really get a couple songs done, I'm going to send them to her and say, hey, however this comes to you and what you think up, how about you throw something together and let me see what it looks like? And we'll probably work on an original piece for 9. But even 8, it has that same it just, I saw the image and I'm like, this is album 8. So and talking to her and going back and forth in conversation, she agreed basically with that too, that yeah, this seems like it's a good marriage there between the art and what is being said throughout the lyrics and whatnot. So
it's great. It's kind of fascinating. It's like you've got these different strands of Veilburner as a concept, of the conceptualization of the music, of the visuals, that sort of they evolve and they link with each other as you go in these different strands. It's very cool to hear the way that these different elements are all sort of connecting together. I'm sure that's going to look very cool once you have something that's actually really directly being made for your music.
yeah, it's insane too, because when you're first writing something, until you actually have enough material, or you've written enough, you start to I revisit some of the lyrics and I'm like, I might have an aha moment on where I'm at, uh, personally in life with, doing spiritual work and stuff. And I go, wait, I'm reading this back. I've always known this. It's kind of cool. It's an aha moment to see, like, hey, it's always been embedded there. It's kind of just, it's lurking beneath. And it also, just with Veilburner, the name, it allows us to go in so many different avenues. We don't have to go onto the one genre with just death metal. Like we're able to move around. And as he's built the music and has been able to just add a little bit more seasoning in there with different genres, like it just allows the visuals and everything to just go into their own universe. It's everything's working out so far. I don't know how it is. Like I said, we don't really try too hard to think on it, because we ultimately just want to have fun and write good music, and hopefully have someone that appreciates it in the end, and we're able to pay it forward by, hey, they were inspired by one of these songs, or even a title, or they see the art. And the art, I think, is crucial. I think a lot of times I even skip over great bands that I see that released and I didn't ever hear of them, and I look at the album cover and I'm like, that's awful. I just don't like it. And I miss out on a really good band because the art just didn't resonate with me.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think anyone can tell that you put a lot of thought and effort into all the different aspects of the presentation, whether musical or visual, of the band. I want to go back to something that Chris mentioned earlier for a question with Dave. So, Chris, you mentioned about how with at the end of the sixth album, you thought that you were going to have a bit of a break from Veilburner, and then suddenly you found yourself with the seventh album's worth of recordings presented to you. I remember, I don't remember which interview it was, Dave, but I think it might have actually been the very first one. You talked about creating music for Veilburner as being a kind of like a purging yourself of all of these different musical ideas that you have, and that you would feel this anxiety if you didn't manage to flesh out the various things that were rushing through you. How do you feel about that sentiment now, a few years later?
Um, Having done, I mean, at this point, I've written the music for, I just finished a couple months ago writing for album nine. So having done it nine times, a lot of that, you know, what is it? That artistic need to purge yourself of ideas, I've gotten a lot of that out of my system. Fortunately, I still enjoy it tremendously. So now I do it as, I keep writing music as because, you know, I don't have so much of a need anymore, but because I just love to do it. And I'm hoping over like I don't want to say this. I'm playing the long game, if that makes any sense. Like I want this to be something that we can continue to do for years and years and years. Like I'm 51 years old. I hope I can retire when I'm 65. I want to still be doing this when I'm 65 as something to keep me busy during my retirement. A lot of my mom's friends like are passing away. She's getting, they're getting up there in years, and a lot of them complain that once they retired, they had like they'd their job was their identity,
Mm.
and when they retired or um when they were in some cases when they were widowed or widowered, they lost such a huge part of themselves that they didn't know what to do, and it really hurt. Like, so there's always that I can't wait to retire. There's always that sentiment, I can't wait to retire because then I won't have to work anymore. I can just sit around and do nothing. Well, apparently sitting around and doing nothing isn't good for you. As I'm learning. So it's like I want to have something on the side, like something personal on the side, a project that I can keep doing for as long as I'm alive. And um, so now is like we're laying the sort of the foundation for that. Um, like I said, we're playing the long game, we're taking our time, and that's I think I owe a lot of what you were saying before, how everything just seems to kind of tie into each other and build upon itself. I owe a lot of that to the fact that we're never rushed, that we can take
Mm.
our time with this. We're not working in the world of deadlines like if we were in, like we were a big band in the commercial music industry. I think that's how you end up with a lot of albums that have just too much filler on them. Is
Mm.
a band was rushing to meet a deadline, things were, and it comes across in the work, and I want to avoid that at all costs. So I like the level that we're working at with Transcending Obscurity. They leave us alone when we have something for them, and they ask for it, we give it to them. We'll keep working. Whenever they need something, we'll have something in the pipeline ready to go. We didn't feel rushed to finish it. Um, because like I said, me and Chris both have our families and we have our work, like our jobs they come first. So we can devote time to this when we have it, when we can make it, but it's not, Veilburner's not on the front burner in our lives. So fortunately we have the time that we can really take that time to make sure things are right, and do things piecemeal. When we have a free day here and there, I'll lay down, next part of the song, or when he has some quiet time, he'll sit down, get his head into lyrics and write them. But we can juggle all those things and not feel like we're rushed,
Yeah.
and we don't have that sense of deadline anxiety. So yeah, it's it's like I said, it's the long game, and I want to keep things on the course that they are. I don't want to deviate too much. Um, something that I hope I can continue to do for years to come.
Yeah, well, you seem to have a rhythm that works.
Hmm.
Um, Thinking about the way in which you do have these connecting aspects of the concepts of the albums and the music and the visuals, have you discussed or thought about at some point doing some kind of box set that's going to have all of the albums up to a certain point, whether it would be CD or vinyl? I don't think your first albums were ever on vinyl, but I guess there would be the possibility of making vinyl versions in the future if you wanted to have some kind of like 9 album box set, for example.
It would depend on the demand. And I don't spend as much time on social media, I think, as Chris. So, and I'm kind of being an older middle-aged person. I'm kind of behind in the technology of what all the young kids are doing and with social and how to use it. So Chris is, I mean, I keep the Facebook thing. Um, I make periodic updates. Chris is more with the Instagram and the photos. But it would really depend, like I said, it would really depend on the demand, which I'm not so good at gauging
Mm.
because I'm not connected with the social media world. If there was a demand and Transcending Obscurity thought that they could make some money doing a reissue, I would love to explore that with them. But I would have to leave it up to them as be they're the ones who really kind of have their boots on the ground as far as where the demand is for for our stuff. I wouldn't want to push something out there, flood the market with stuff if there wasn't the demand for it, and I wouldn't want a label to go broke.
Yeah.
You know, just making product for us if people aren't going to buy it. So
Yeah, a nine album box set is quite a big commitment.
that's something that Metallica could get away with, but yeah, because I mean it's band at our level, it would be a really small run. A really small run costs more money
Mm.
than if you were, you know, buying all these products to put together into a box. If you were buying in bulk, obviously a wholesaler would cut you a break on price.
Yeah.
But if you're only buying a small amount to meet a small demand, you're not the amount of money you would have to charge to make up for the amount that you spent would be more, and you know, that might be a deal breaker for people if it costs you. Even if people who want to buy it, it'd be a deal breaker if the label had to charge too much for it.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it in threes. I'm not trying to push the idea here, but maybe once you've released album number 9, you could do 9, 8, and 7 as a trio, and then depending on how well that did, you go, oh, let's do 6, 5, and 4, and then maybe 3, 2, and 1,
Hmm.
for example.
Again, the like the people who have their heads around business that like the label would have to
Yeah, for
they would
sure.
have to figure that out and see what they could figure out what they could sell and then what price
Yeah,
it would cost them to put something like that together. Um, they have all the metrics and the data around our sales and if it would work. But I'd be open to whatever they would want to. Obviously, if it got to a point where they were considering releasing a back catalog or releasing sets, that would be an indication to me that we're doing something right. That that there is demand. That would I'd be happy with that. But if it never got to that point, I wouldn't want them to waste the money and go and you know um, put out something that doesn't sell because then they might not want to work with us after that. They might say that they can't work with us because they blew too much money on something that didn't work. So
yeah,
you
for
know
sure.
the right thing at the right time.
On another note with that, just from another like peek into what we're doing, I was going to try and have, I was going to start with just album 7 here since it was releasing, but I'm not going to reach the time to be able to actually have it done by November. But I've been slowly piecing together basically a deeper dive on what the lyrics mean. So it'd be sort of a poem lyric book, but I'm also using Instagram here once the album releases. We have so many photos from all the albums that haven't ever been seen. Some we probably have, Dave probably forgot we even had some of them. So I'm going to start really using the Instagram to kind of take a peek back and revisit some of those albums through the lyrics, through the pictures, and kind of give even a deeper dive since we're not a live project. That at
Mm.
least will kind of revisit those, allow people to see where our heads were at that time, see where they're at now in relation to the other albums, and just it's a deeper dive into us since we don't play live and stuff. Instagram uh, is really easy. I've never taken advantage of it, and we have all these photos. I just am trying to figure out different ways that if people want that access, they can have it at least there. And then, like Dave was saying, with releasing the previous albums, if we would do that on my end, my thoughts would be you would do 1 through 3, and then you would do 4 and 5, and then you would do 6 through 9. That would sort of be the breakup. of how I would envision if we'd ever re-release anything or do it as a package deal. But outside of album one, that's the only one, the Three Light Bearers. It's gone. We don't have any copies. I might have one left. I can't remember if Dave shipped his off to someone that he had. So um, they're still accessible. So
yeah, I have one copy. I have just my
yeah,
own personal
so
copy. That's it.
Yeah, I think yeah, having some kind of book with the lyrics would be really cool. Um, and it's funny talking about the social media. So I think when we first spoke, I think at that time, I'd quit all social media, and I came back to it recently and try to just like use it, functionally to promote things. And it's kind of funny and slightly embarrassing. I didn't realize until about an hour before this interview. I was like, I wonder if Veilburner are on Instagram. And then I realized, like, oh shit, you are on Instagram and you've been there for ages. And maybe to your point, like you hadn't posted so much in the beginning, but I realized already, like, oh, this is great. There's all kinds of fascinating visual aspects that you've got there. Just to that point of the use or the potential misuse of social media, how do you both feel in general about social media? Because we're all sort of a similar age. How do you feel about it, and how do you use it, and how do you think how much is it worth spending time on as far as,
Uh,
promoting the band goes?
uh, First, I want to say I'm sure glad it wasn't around when I was young.
Yeah, agreed.
it is a necessary evil.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
oh, so no, yeah, it's a necessary evil. I especially, when you take real life and you start going through different things like an election and stuff, it's really hard to get on social media and not separate the person from what they're posting sometimes. So I try to stay away from Facebook more so now, just because I don't have the time for it. And I mean, social media, it can create an anxiety, but that's why I really like Instagram. And I'm not as disciplined as I should be with it. You'll see there's spurts. I'll get a couple days in and then I'll go a week without posting something. So I'm going to try to work on that. But Instagram, you don't have to write a lot. You can use it as basically a creative outlet. Unlike Facebook, I feel like there has to be more involved to it than just being able to post a picture, maybe a phrase, and some hashtags. And that will go a lot farther than going on Facebook, posting a picture. Uh, People won't look at the comments, they won't look at the whole header. They'll just maybe like the picture and that's that. It doesn't connect the same way to me. Instagram just and unfortunately my wife's been telling me that for the last 5 years, and I'm like, yeah, I know. And we start using it, and we've seen that people are definitely engaging in it.
Mm.
So
Mhm. Yeah, I got the Facebook. I got on Facebook, my personal page. I was a holdout because I remember the MySpace days. I remember with my old band, like we put a lot of effort into building a lot of effort into building the MySpace page, and then like that platform collapsed. So
Yeah.
it was like everyone started joining Facebook. So I was like, well, you know, is it just going to be the same thing? Is it just going to be it's popular for a while and then it collapses? Like I didn't know if I wanted to expend this put my it's that's something I wanted to put my time into is doing the Facebook thing if ultimately that was going to collapse too. But then Facebook, it seemed to it kind of it hit, it's clicked, it stuck around, it went public, and then it was like, all right, I'll make a page. Okay, so I think it was like 2012 was I held out, and that was when I made my personal Facebook page. And by the time 2014 rolled around and me and Chris started doing this project, it was like, okay, it's necessary. So yeah, social media, it's a double-edged sword.
Mm.
It's obviously necessary for promotion because that's where everybody is. And it's a great source of information, but the other side of the sword is it's a great source of misinformation. Um, Gone are the days where, you get your information and news from um, from gatekeeper sources like news. In the old days, you had your news outlets, certain news outlets, and basically decided what information was going to be disseminated. There's pros and cons to that. Pro is, the information is or should be vetted as correct before, an outlet disseminates it. Because if it turns out to not be true later, they have all this crow to eat because they released false information. So there is that certain amount of vetting that goes with traditional news sources, um, which is the good. But the downside to that is you never hear the whole story. You hear what they decide you want to hear.
Yeah.
Contrast that with social media, and everybody has a platform. You can hear everything, but nothing's vetted.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's better? Is it better to live in a world where information is vetted to be accurate before it's given to you, and certain things are withheld? Or is it better to live and you never get the whole story? Or is it better to live in a world where you're just bombarded with, information, misinformation, conflicting reports, and you're left to decide what is correct and what is not? And social media, the way the algorithms work is whatever it detects or it watches things that you tend to engage with, and whatever you engage with, it's going to send you more of. So if you start going down rabbit holes, start getting your head starts going to strange places, it's going to feed you more of those things that it knows you're interested in, and that's going to shape your worldview. If you're not careful, it's going to shape your worldview because you know it's selecting what you see, and it's different for everybody. Everybody's got their own algorithm. So I think it's a big reason why things are so, what's the word I'm looking for? Divisive. People are so divided now. It's because they've been fed their own version of, you know, reality by the algorithms, and they're
Yeah.
all in their own headspace. At least back when it was just TV and it was, advertising and commercials, everybody saw the same thing. I mean, we all had to we were all subjected to the same advertising. We were all subjected to the same um, uh, programming and televised programming and news reports and things. Now it's completely individualized, and everyone's going off into their little corners, and because like great for things, for some things, not so great for others. But I I limit myself to Facebook. I think Facebook. I've tried Instagram. I didn't. I just don't like Instagram. I don't know what it is about Instagram. First of all, I don't like how every image that you post, it wants to put into like a square. Like if you have wide shot images, it's gonna, just gonna chop the sides. It'll chop the top and bottoms. It'll just give you that little square thing to put the imagery in, and it's like, well, I don't like that. I want people to see the whole picture. So I want to keep using Facebook. Facebook, you can upload photos. Facebook, you can also do other things with. So it's like I see Facebook as, and I'm just probably just talking as an old person. Facebook's enough. Like all these things like Twitter and Instagram and everything, it's almost like they're just versions of Facebook, but not as functional as Facebook. Like they don't do all the things. They do one thing really well, like the photos with Instagram or the text for Twitter. But like Facebook just kind of seems to do all of those things. So why do we need the others? But again, I'm just speak strictly as an old person.
It does sound like no one should be expecting a Veilburner TikTok page anytime soon.
Oh no, I
No.
mean, no, I knew from the start that was malware. I'm like, I'm not going to let this on my phone. It's malware. I mean, but you know, other,
Yeah.
the rest of the world or decided, well, you know, I don't care. This is useful for video. So I think if you just took TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, it's like you put all those things together and you got Facebook.
I think if we were a live band, which I am still very glad that we are not, because I think it would take away from the mystique of it all. But if we were a live band, I probably wouldn't be posting half of what I've posted to Facebook in years prior, or to the Instagram now, because Instagram's at least allowing those who follow us a little more into our universe.
Yeah.
Since we're not playing live, that engages them. But I don't want to sound like a second wave black metal elitist or anything like that. But I'm one of those guys that's just like, if you're gonna find it and like it, you're gonna find it and like it. But it's hard to find it and like it if you're not playing out live also. So
Yeah.
with all the masks and everything, just allows us, we have a universe. You should see the universe. So Instagram definitely, it has benefited with that to be able to show people and showcase some of the bizarre stuff we're doing. So
Yeah, to the point about the way in which social media can kind of steer people further down rabbit holes with these algorithms. I think from the musical side of things, as much as I do use Spotify and I do appreciate its value sometimes, I still do find myself feeling more drawn to listen to physical albums that I have. And I feel it's like I somehow value them more when I go like, I am going to pick up a record or I'm going to pick up a CD and I'm going to stick it on. So, you know, circling back around to talking about the band and talking about the album in particular and Transcending Obscurity Records, you know, I really appreciate the fact that when a Veilburner record comes out, you can go, right, this is the record. You know, it has its own particular identity, and I don't have to you know, get led off down little algorithms, et cetera, et cetera. But to that point, November the 15th is the release date for the Duality of Decapitation and Wisdom. Transcending Obscurity Records has got a European web store and it has a North American web store, so people can get hold of it from different parts of the world. I guess they can also download it from Bandcamp as well if they would like to. And then, you know, there are the algorithmic options available as well. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Chris, Dave. It was great to meet you in real time and get to talk
You
to you
too.
again.
Yep. Yeah, this is fun.
And yeah, I hope you get a great reception for the record, and I'm looking forward to what comes next with Veilburner, because there is clearly going to be more.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
yeah, it almost sounds like I might have to retire early because if he's retired in writing, I might have to write so far ahead so that if I die, there's enough material for him to keep going. Because yeah, he is a machine. So yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out a get rich quick scheme so that I can accommodate that, which is a good thing. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, it's going to keep me sane for the coming years.
Yeah, plenty to keep you busy.
Plenty more where that came from.
All right, Chris, Dave, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
all the best.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care.
Cheers, you too.